Barron didn't stop there. He continued, his voice steady, each word measured but powerful. "But there's a difference between making assumptions and trying to build a narrative," he said, looking out over the crowd. "Sometimes, that narrative is more about the person telling the story than the one it's being told about." The room was still, hanging on every word. The journalist, now visibly taken aback, stood motionless, their earlier confidence deflated. Barron's words had cut through the tension like a blade, and in a moment, he had flipped the script. Barron paused for a moment, his eyes still fixed on the journalist, before finishing with a final, decisive statement. "I don't need to prove anything to anyone," he said, his tone resolute. "But I do believe that some people might want to reconsider how they approach others and how much they think they really know." With that, he turned and walked back to his seat, leaving the room in stunned silence. The journalist's earlier quips had been met with laughter, but now, Barron's composed, calm response had everyone reevaluating their reactions. The tension in the room didn't lift immediately. It lingered, thick and heavy. The spotlight, once shining on the journalist, had shifted irrevocably to Barron Trump. And in that moment, it was clear, the quiet young man had just made the most powerful statement of the evening. At the gala, there was something important that often gets overlooked. Barron's tone shifted slightly, an underlying intensity building in his words. "Behind every headline, behind every punchline, there's a human being," he began, his voice quiet but carrying a depth of meaning. "Someone with their own struggles, their own dreams, and their own story. You may think you know me because of who my father is, but you don't. Not really." The journalist, who had been gripping the edge of the podium in anticipation, now seemed visibly uncomfortable. Barron's words weren't an attack. They were a mirror, reflecting back the weight of what had just occurred. "What I've learned," Barron continued, pausing for a moment, "is that respect doesn't have to be earned. It should be given freely, especially when you don't know someone's story." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd, but Barron wasn't finished. He turned slightly, now addressing both the audience and the journalist. "We live in a time where it's easy to tear each other down," he said, his voice steady but filled with quiet conviction. "Words have power, they can hurt or they can heal. They can divide or they can unite. And I think we could all use a little more of the latter." The room was spellbound. Barron's words, spoken with such calm resolve, carried a weight that transcended his age. It was clear that he wasn't just responding to the moment, he was speaking to something larger, something universal. Barron took a step back, his gaze locking once again with the journalist. "I hope this gives you something to think about," he said softly. There was no malice in his voice, only a quiet strength that left the room in stunned silence. He turned and walked back to his seat, the soft click of his shoes on the polished floor the only sound in the hushed room. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the journalists stood frozen, their bravado dissolved in the face of Barron's composed, dignified response. As Barron sat down and the applause began to build, the real impact of his words would echo far beyond that room. At first, the applause was hesitant, starting from somewhere near the front of the room. But it quickly spread, growing louder and faster, until the entire ballroom was on its feet, erupting into a thunderous standing ovation. Some clapped with admiration. Others with a sense of redemption for the awkwardness that had hung in the air just minutes before. The journalist, still standing at the podium, tried to muster a smile, but it was clear that the moment no longer belonged to them. Barron, seated back at his table, remained composed, offering only a polite nod to the attendees around him. It wasn't humility or shyness, it was the quiet assurance of someone who had said exactly what needed to be said. Within hours, snippets of the moment began flooding social media. Attendees had discreetly recorded Barron's speech on their phones, and the footage quickly spread across platforms. Tweets, Instagram stories, and TikTok clips captured the essence of the evening, with captions ranging from admiration for Barron's composure to critiques of the journalist's misplaced humor. "Barron Trump just schooled an entire room on class and respect," read one viral tweet. Another post, shared by a prominent celebrity in attendance, stated, No matter what you think of his family, this young man just gave us all something to think about. News outlets picked up the story the following morning. Some praised Barron for his maturity, calling it a defining moment for someone who had spent much of his life in the shadow of public scrutiny. Others debated the ethics of the journalist's remarks, questioning whether public figures, especially young ones, should ever be fair game for such commentary. The journalist, for their part, issued a statement the next day. Comedy and commentary are powerful tools, but they must be wielded responsibly. Last night, I crossed a line, and I apologized to Barron Trump for my remarks. However, not everyone accepted the apology at face value. Talk shows, podcasts, and online forums buzzed with heated debates about the incident. Some argued that Barron's speech was a much-needed call for civility in an increasingly polarized world. Others saw it as a poignant reminder that even those in the public eye are human beings deserving of respect. For Barron, however, the frenzy of attention seemed irrelevant. He returned to his daily life with the same quiet dignity that had defined his response at the gala. Those who knew him said he barely acknowledged the uproar, choosing instead to focus on his studies and personal interests. But while Barron moved on, the lessons from that night lingered, sparking conversations that reached far beyond the ballroom. As the dust settled, its ripple effects continued to echo far and wide. News outlets eventually moved on to other stories, but the moment lived on in discussions at dinner tables, classrooms, and offices. People dissected the evening, not just for its drama, but for the powerful lessons it left behind. Barron's calm and thoughtful response struck a chord in an age dominated by outrage and instant reactions. His choice to approach the situation with poise and perspective was a refreshing anomaly. Many drew parallels to their own lives, asking themselves, how often do we pause before reacting? How often do we choose words that build instead of words that destroy? For some, the incident was a wake-up call. It highlighted how easy it is to dehumanize others in the name of humor, politics, or entertainment. The journalist's comments were a stark reminder of the power words hold, not just to entertain, but to wound. Parents used the moment as a teaching opportunity for their children. Videos of Barron's speech became a tool in classrooms to discuss respect, empathy, and the importance of standing up for oneself without tearing others down. Teachers praised his ability to address conflict with grace, encouraging students to think critically about how they communicate. Yet the most profound impact of the night was its ability to bridge divides, if only for a moment. People from different political beliefs and walks of life found themselves united in admiration for Barron's maturity. It wasn't about his last name or his father's legacy. It was about a young man demonstrating that respect and empathy still have a place in the world, even in the face of provocation. By choosing to respond with kindness and integrity, Barron had reminded everyone in that room, and countless others watching from afar, that dignity is a choice. His actions showed that no matter how heated or polarized a situation may become, there is always power in choosing to rise above. As the conversations continued, one sentiment seemed to resonate most. Words can wound, but they can also heal. It's up to each of us to decide how we use them. In the end, Barron's actions didn't just defend his own dignity, they inspired a moment of collective reflection. A reminder that respect, even when undeserved, can be a transformative force. Let Barron's example be a reminder for us all: words have power. Use them wisely, whether it's with a friend, a stranger, or even someone you disagree with. Choose respect and empathy. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that challenge and inspire us to be better. Let's keep the conversation going.